Conversations, episode Patrick Ewing. Shout out New York Knicks on their recent NBA title. I am K Bex, your host, and whether you are a first time listener or a long time listener rejoining us, welcome into the show and thank you for listening. If you're a first timer or a long timer who hasn't done so yet, and you're wondering how you can follow us and make sure that you catch new episodes as they come through, we are on all of the major social platforms. So that's a great way to do it. If you like us, follow us, subscribe to us. We'll always let you know on those platforms when something new is coming. We're on Facebook, X at KBEX_ATC. Instagram at cornversationspod. And if you want to get involved with the show in any way, we've got a mailbag, conversationspod@gmail.com. You can send us questions for reading on a future episode, and you can also send us those questions on any of the socials platforms as well. We're on all the major listening platforms, so give us a like, give us a subscribe on those. And in particular, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, a like and review is extremely helpful on that platform. It is what helps the algorithm understand that people are listening to us and that you want to hear more of us, and it gets our name out there to those who have not found us yet. So thank you in advance for all of your support there, and we hope that what we are providing you guys is entertaining. We are now into mid-June, so it feels to some extent like it's a little bit of a breather, but it's not. Yes, the NHL playoffs and the NBA playoffs have finally concluded, but we have started the World Cup. We're now into day 7 as I'm recording this, and honestly, it has been everything and more as far as its billing is concerned. I know that there were a ton of negative stories about the World Cup before it started, anything from how the US was going to treat the players coming into the country to the high ticket costs to whether or not the games were going to be diluted because of the expanded tournament. And quite frankly, all of those things have melted away in the first week of the tournament. We've had excellent matches all throughout the group stage so far. The players are playing at a very high level. All the stars are out right now. Mbappe, Holland, Messi, Kane, all of them had at least 2 goals in their first match day. So it's really bringing out the best in these players. And we're not really seeing those negative stories anymore. And it's funny how that works when these types of things are leading up to their start. You hear all the negativity, everything that could go wrong, everything that was done wrong leading up to it, and then when there's actually play going on, everybody is just fixated on what's going on in the pitch. So great to see, but honestly not that surprising. This is a tournament that's been around for a long time and it has been successful in the past. So why wouldn't it be successful in a country that is really latched onto soccer as a sport and has grown quite significantly in the last 30 years. If you want to learn more about that and the casual perspective from a soccer fan, check out our last episode. I had my guest J-Dad on to talk about that, and we think that it was a pretty interesting conversation. But we are going to talk soccer today. We're going to talk maybe the only drawback that someone tuning into this sport significantly for the first time would have as far as the first match day is concerned. And then we will give a shout out to the Knicks and the NBA title. We've got a top 10 list to pair along with that as well. So teaser and also a reason to stick around for the entirety of this episode. But as far as the World Cup is concerned and the draw. We're, of course, talking about the dreaded tie, which fans of soccer, or maybe what you would call casual fans of soccer, the people that maybe aren't watching it every weekend, would say is one of the downsides of this sport, is the fact that a draw can be seen as a positive thing. Now, there have been a lot of them in match day 1 of the World Cup. We're almost through the first group match play. There's 3 of them in the group stage, and we've got 12 groups. So tonight, as I'm recording this, the final couple of matches are being played. So there is an opportunity for there to be a couple more, but in general, there have been about a third of the teams that have drawn in their first match of this World Cup. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, that cannot possibly be good television to watch. How is it possible that of 48 teams, we have more than 16 of them that have drawn, and you're saying that this is can't miss television? Well, let me give you a few reasons why a draw is a good thing, especially when it comes to the World Cup. Number one, and this is no different than any World Cup in years past, at least in terms of the modern World Cup, a draw in the first match stage or in the first match day really gives you an opportunity to keep pace with the rest of the teams in your group. In the past, when only two teams have moved on from each group, a draw is a huge difference in terms of teams that have been able to make it out of the group and teams who have a significantly lower percentage of making it through group play into the knockout round. So that is something that has always been on the minds of these teams, is that any points are better than none. None really sets you behind the eight ball after match day one, whereas a single point, especially if other teams in your group are doing the same thing, really kind of puts you on level playing field, and you can look to match days 2 and 3 with a very different perspective than if you're chasing the rest of the teams in the group. So that's nothing new. But the thing that is new from this World Cup, and I do think that it might have something to do with the fact that we've seen so many draws, is that there is a change in the tiebreaker rules for this expanded World Cup. And in previous World Cups, to kind of clarify, the tiebreaker scenario between two teams that were even on points at the end of match stage play was goal differential. But now, in this 48 team expanded tournament format, the number one tiebreaker in the group stage is actually head to head results. So, why does this have any importance with regards to draws versus wins and losses? Well, if you have drawn against a team that you are tied with at the end of match play, then you have to go to secondary tiebreakers to decide the group stage standings. And that might end up having a significant impact on a number of teams, because not only are you giving an opportunity for teams to have a chance to qualify from a secondary tiebreaker scenario, but also because 8 of the 12 third place teams in this tournament will qualify for the knockout stages, there is a greater chance that if you draw, that you're going to have enough points to move on as a third place team. You know, imagine if you're a third place team and you have only gotten yourself a couple of points, as opposed to a team that maybe had a draw and a victory when they went a little bit more aggressively in match stages 2 or 3. Obviously, the team in scenario B would be the one moving on with 4 points as opposed to 2. So this can absolutely have an impact on later stages of this tournament. And I do think that a lot of teams are going to look at the draw in the first match stage and say, yeah, absolutely, we would take it. In fact, some of these teams that we're going to cover here in this next segment would look at a draw almost as a win. So, looking at those teams, and we're going to go through and we're going to look at all 18 of them that currently are on the list of having drawn in the first match stage. Match day. I keep saying match stage. Match day. Match day 1, 3 days of matches in the group stage. There we go. But as I'm recording this, I'm also keeping an eye on the Ghana-Panama game in Group L. So that'll give a little bit of a timestamp as to when I'm recording this. And right now, about 70 minutes through, these two teams are still tied. So there's a possibility that we'll get a couple of bonus teams here at the end of this segment, depending on how things go. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with Group B, which has finished and which had all 4 teams tie in their first match day. Now, we're going to take a look at each of the teams that have tied, and we're going to give them a green light, a yellow light, or a red light. How are we defining those? Green light means the team is going to absolutely accept that draw, move on as planned with their match day 2 and 3 plans that they probably had before the tournament. A yellow light means caution. Maybe it's not the best result for this team, but it's not something that they necessarily have to be concerned about or overly concerned about. And then a red light means it might be time to pump the brakes and pivot just after one match day. And that is not a good position to be in. There's not very many of these teams, in my opinion, that have a red light, but there are a few of them. So again, we're going to look at all 18 teams and maybe we'll give you 20 by the end of this episode. But Group B, all four have tied, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. We're going to start with Switzerland, who, in a lot of people's minds, was the group favorite, despite this being a group featuring one of the hosts, Canada. Switzerland has arguably the best team on paper. They have a lot of attacking skill up front, but against Qatar, they were really unable to flex that muscle and played a pretty conservative game plan in that first game. And something that has kind of hurt Switzerland in the past, I think, is that they haven't necessarily had that attacking power up front. So they've always had to play a conservative style, but this is a different team. And it was expected that they were going to be able to handle Qatar fairly easily, and they just weren't able to do that. It wasn't that they were struggling to hold Qatar from scoring themselves, but they weren't able to get that second goal, which would have given them the victory in that first match. And they gave up a late goal to Qatar, which ended up leaving both teams with 1 point. So Switzerland, given what they have for the rest of group play, the two stronger teams in the group outside of Qatar, I think that you have to look at this team and give them a yellow, and a dark yellow at that, almost an orange, because Qatar was supposed to be the easy 3 points. And that's going to be the same scenario for the rest of the teams in the group as well. And you have to imagine that at least one of them is going to get that. So now Switzerland is going to have to go and they're going to have to play the hosts, Canada, and they're going to have to play a very difficult team in Bosnia and Herzegovina to get that victory, more than likely, to set themselves up for where they want to be in this tournament. Moving on to the next team, we've got Canada. These are the hosts in Group B. I feel like, and I was in the same boat here coming into the tournament, that Canada was not the team to pick to win this group, even though they were the hosts, because of how they fared in recent tournaments in the past with this supposed golden generation. So while they have the golden generation, it's a situation where Jesse Marsh hasn't necessarily gotten the best out of them yet, hasn't unlocked that potential that everybody has been saying they've had. And so there was already some conservatism as far as how Canada would do in this group. And they had a tough first match against Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it basically went as you would have expected, where it was a defensive battle. Neither team was really able to break through offensively. You could almost say that Bosnia got lucky in their first goal, and it was Canada knocking on the door for most of the rest of the game. But they did get that goal, and they're in a position now where I think they will look at a tie and they would feel pretty good about it. Obviously, they still have the game against Switzerland coming up, but they do have that game against Qatar, which, again, is probably going to be looked at as 3 points for the other teams in the group not named Switzerland. And Canada also has the benefit of being able to look around the group, see what they actually need out of that game. And I do think that that's going to help. So I would give Canada a green light, even though it's just a point, even though they're the hosts and there are heavy expectations. There is a lot to like about where they're at right now. Moving on then to Qatar, and I've been kind of puking all over Qatar, I guess you could say, in this segment, but their tie against Switzerland is a great result for them. It puts them into a position that I feel like a lot of people did not expect them to be in at this stage, which is even with everybody else in the group. So Qatar, not really a whole lot to say about it. They're still going to have their challenges against Bosnia and against Canada. I think you're going to see maybe some more aggressive strategies with those two teams, although in Bosnia's case, they're already going to be a defensive team by nature. So there is an opportunity here for Qatar based on the way that they were able to play against Switzerland, where they went from possible minnow in the group to a team that if they can get a result against either one of the next two teams they play, they're very much in the conversation to make it out of this group. And then lastly, Bosnia and Herzegovina. I look at this very similarly to Canada where I think in that game, both teams would have walked out of there with a point and would have been fairly happy. I think Bosnia more so than Canada, given the circumstances. But when you consider how much Canada was knocking on the door there in the second half, and the fact that Bosnia really doesn't have a ton of offensive firepower, and the firepower they do have is 40 years old, and Edin Dzeko, who did not play in the first match stage or match, there I go again, match day, that you have to be pretty happy with a point against the host. So Bosnia is another green light here. So a number of green lights and then a dark yellow in the case of Switzerland. I think Switzerland's the only one that would be coming away from Group B not all that happy with the result. Moving on then to Group C, and there were two teams that did tie. It was the biggest match of last Saturday. It was actually one of the biggest matches, at least from an anticipation standpoint, in the entire group stage, and that was Morocco and Brazil, two teams currently ranked in FIFA's top 10 for global rankings. It's actually the only group stage game where that is the case. And so for that reason, I think you can look at this game and you can say, okay, well, if you've got such a heavy hitting game early, the last thing you want to do is lose points. Both teams should be happy with this draw, right? Well, in the case of Morocco, I would agree, especially given the history that we've seen with Brazil, given the fact that Morocco is really well put together, but isn't going to blow you away offensively, whereas Brazil is going to look to try to score goals. So, really, in this game, I looked for Morocco to kind of try to hold the line more so than try to get too aggressive against Brazil, take their opportunities. And that was mostly what we saw in that game. And so for Morocco, I do think it's a well-earned point. I think it's a point that they can be happy with. And then you look at the other two games in the group stage against Scotland and against Haiti. And given the talent that Morocco's got, I do think that they could still end up with 7 points. And that would be a pretty good result after 3 match days. It's probably an opportunity for them to come out of this group as the winners. Brazil, on the other hand, is not so happy about this. At least I don't think they should be. And the reason is because there are some expectations here for Brazil. I don't personally have them. I have them going to the quarterfinals and losing, but a lot of people would look at Brazil as a real World Cup title contender. And if you look at them as a contender, I think that you had to have been a little bit disappointed with the attacking style that Brazil was able to display against Morocco. Yes, it's a well-disciplined back, and yes, this is a Morocco team or a Morocco nation, I guess. It's not necessarily the same team that did quite well in the previous World Cup, but Brazil had an opportunity to make a statement. And if they were able to make a statement against Morocco, I think that there was an opportunity that they could have fairly easily run away with this group stage. But the questions now creep in about this team and about whether or not their style, which is to put pedal to the metal and try to score some goals against teams, is actually going to work when they play other potential title contenders in this tournament. So with Brazil, I would give them a yellow, and we'll see how it goes with match days 2 and 3 for them. I fully expect that they're going to be able to take care of Haiti, and I think that they should be able to take care of Scotland. But getting off on the neutral foot with a draw against Morocco certainly makes results, 3 points rather, very important for the Brazilians. Moving on then to Group Stage F, we went from Group Stage C to Group Stage F before we got any more draws in this tournament. But this draw that we're going to bring up next between these next two teams was possibly the game of the tournament so far. Lots of back and forth play, lots of attacking style, really technical skill in the midfield for both teams. So I look at both of them as having a really good performance despite it ending up with 1 point for both teams. And that's Japan and the Netherlands. I think going into this game, you could look at it and you could have predicted a draw somewhat confidently. Japan was maybe a slight underdog in this game, but again, very good technical midfield play there. They were coming in not really sure how some injuries to key players on that federation were going to affect them. But at the same time, Japan always plays with a team first style. So that showed up once again in this game against the Dutch. And they were also able to get some really nice goals as well. So I would absolutely look at Japan as a green light after match day one. The Netherlands is likely going to be the other team battling for the first place marker here in Group F. And so Japan should feel really happy about what they were able to do. The Dutch, similar situation. I think the Dutch feel like they have an opportunity to really compete in this tournament. They're a dark horse title contender, if you want to call them that. I'm not sure if they quite have the skill set to be able to do that. I like Cody Gakpo. I like Somerville. But then after that, you're looking at some players who have some tread on the tires, or wear on the tires, I guess you could say, on the back line, and guys like Memphis Depay coming off the bench. So the Dutch, I'm not maybe as high on as some other people are, which is why I think this draw against Japan is just fine for them. I think there's absolutely the opportunity for them to come out of this group as winners. If you look at the rest of the group, they should be able to. The Netherlands should be able to handle Tunisia. They seem like they're in disarray right now, having fired their coach already. And Sweden's going to be an interesting game for both Japan and the Dutch. But I think with the Dutch having a decent enough back line, it's not going to be the same game for Sweden. So I would absolutely look at the Netherlands and give them a green light as well. But maybe less of a green light, maybe a light green light, kind of trending towards that yellow for the Dutch, if only because the expectation there is to win the group. Whereas with Japan, I think they would be happy getting out of the group in second or even third place. Moving on to Group G. This is another group where we saw full draws across all four teams. Starting with New Zealand. And this is a dark, dark green because New Zealand is not a team that anybody really expected to do anything about. They were kind of a meme coming into the tournament with the whole Tim Payne social media campaign. So this is a team that was, you could almost say that they were there for the vibes alongside some of the other minnow nations. But they came out and they looked very strong offensively against an Iranian team that actually has some expectations coming into this tournament. I really liked what I saw from Chris Wood. Yeah, he's getting up there in age, but great touch still with the ball. And New Zealand seemingly is doing a very good job finding him in the right spots in the box so that he can either do something himself or pass it off to some of the other attacking players on that squad. So New Zealand, even though it was just a game against Iran, I think it's a great point, and it's an opportunity for them to really do something now in a group that I think is the weakest group in the entire group stage. Moving then on to Iran, I would look at Iran and I would actually give them a yellow light. And that sounds odd. There are probably some people listening to this going, Iran, are they really a contender? Well, again, I look at this group as maybe one of the more wide open groups in the group stage. I don't have a ton of expectations for anyone in the group, at least as far as going on into the knockout stages are concerned. So I do think that Iran has some possibility of having expectations here. And maybe they do think that they have an ability to win the group. But the performance that they put on, it kind of left something to be desired defensively. I now have some questions about Iran as far as their ability to contain some very strong players that they're going to play in the next two games when they take on Egypt and they take on Belgium. And New Zealand doesn't necessarily have that individual quality. So the fact that they were able to put 2 goals on this Iranian squad that generally speaking is pretty strong in the back is a little bit concerning. So I would give a yellow light to the Iranians. There's also a little bit of noise going on there in the camp that they're kind of letting go public. And I'm not sure that that's the greatest thing moving forward for them either. It's time to focus here. And when you look at the first match stage or match day, I think that Iran would have been favored to win that game against New Zealand. Then we're going to move on to the only European team in Group G, Belgium. And I was going back and forth on this one because on one hand, I don't have a lot of expectations for Belgium. I think that their window of opportunity in terms of being able to be a true contender for a World Cup title has passed with regards to the golden generation that they had in the past couple of World Cups. And while they do still have some individual skill with Leandro Trossard and Jeremy Doku that are young and have a lot of speed and athleticism that can really hurt the rest of the teams in the group, it just feels to me like Belgium is a team that is consistently not meeting expectations. And when I look at the first match day game against Egypt, I kind of saw the same thing there. Egypt took the lead, forced Belgium on the back foot. Belgium had to then try to claw their way back into the game, which they were able to do. But, you just look at this team, and maybe you look at this team 5 years ago with some of the same players that they have, and you say that type of result should never happen, but it keeps happening. And so I look at Belgium, and while I'm not overly shocked that they only got out of the first day with a tie, I also look at this and I say it's just another example of Belgium not necessarily playing to their full potential. So I have Belgium as a red. Yes, the group is weak in my opinion, and yes, they potentially have the two weaker teams in the group left to play. But with the way that they have been playing in past World Cups and some of the legs that they have in that lineup, I am not sure. I think that this could be a team that does end up getting disappointed in a shocking way and might flame out in the group stage. And then lastly, Egypt. And maybe I underestimated Egypt coming into this tournament because I didn't have a ton of expectations for them. I didn't originally have them moving on into the knockout stage, but I did like what I saw from them against Belgium. I think that the question mark for them going into this tournament was, were they going to get a lot of attacking prowess from anyone outside of Mo Salah? They were able to do that. I think that they looked quite strong in all areas of the pitch. So this is a team now that's similarly to Belgium, you could argue, has their toughest game out of the way after match day one. So if Egypt is able to play this way against either Iran or New Zealand, I think that you're going to see 3 points instead of one, and that's probably going to be enough to get them through in this group. So green light for Egypt. Good on them. They have proven me wrong in what I thought was a relatively weak group. So Mo Salah might be playing more than 3 games in this tournament. Moving on to Group H, then. This is the last of the groups that all 4 teams are locked at 1 point apiece. So a little bit of a conversation about these guys. Let's start with Uruguay. They faced Saudi Arabia in their first match day. They got down to Saudi Arabia in their first match day, and it took until in the late stages for Uruguay to finally force their way back into the game with a timely goal. They weren't able to get the second goal, but they were pushing, and they were doing a pretty good job in the second half. So I would argue that had they been given 10, 15 more minutes, they might have been able to get 3 points against Saudi Arabia, who was mostly hanging on for dear life in that second half. That being said, the question marks are still there for this Uruguayan team about where they're going to find goals. And so I would give them a yellow light here because that was already a concern, and they have a very difficult group that I think got much more difficult because of the results from these teams. And that is going to be tough for Uruguay. You could argue that had Spain gone and won their first game, maybe Uruguay would be looking at a draw and would think, okay, we still have a pretty good opportunity to do what we want to do. But now with a potentially angry, focused Spain team, I think that this might be a very difficult next 2 match days for Uruguay. Moving on to Saudi Arabia, then. Even though I just said that they were hanging on for dear life in the second half, I think that they would absolutely have taken 1 point against Uruguay if you had given it to them before the match started. They were playing very defensive football there in the second half, and it probably wouldn't have worked out for them for much longer. But you know what? The game is only 90 plus minutes, and so they did it correctly. And I think that it would be a green light all the way for Saudi Arabia here. They've still got a tough game against Spain coming up, but the Cape Verde game, you know, you could argue that that is an opportunity for the Saudis to get a victory and really put a lot of pressure on Uruguay in particular, in terms of trying to get out of this group. Moving on then to Spain and their draw against Cape Verde, which is the shock of the tournament so far. Arguably, it's one of the shocks of any World Cup, is something that I had to think long and hard about when I was assigning them a traffic light. Because on one hand, this result is unacceptable if you're a Spain supporter, if you're a Spain player. Nobody went into this tournament thinking Cape Verde would hold a candle to anyone in this group, and they've just done it with a team that is the defending European champions and is trying to win a World Cup and is one of the favorites to do so. But on the other hand, I think that if you look at Spain's starting 11 in that game, they were expecting to try to get by with less than their best. Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams both did not play until later in the second half. Of course, there's question marks about the health there, but at the same time, if they felt like they really needed them, they would have put them in that game to start. And the fact that they didn't suggests that they were looking to try to win with their strength and in depth. And while that didn't work out, I kind of look at this and I say, okay, that's not going to happen again. They no longer have the luxury to do that in match days 2 and 3. But at the same time, there are a lot of players here that are some of the best in the world. And in addition, they were knocking on the door for a lot of the second half. And Cape Verde's goalkeeper put on an excellent performance that is probably going to stand as one of the best defensive performances of this entire tournament. So when you come up against a Cinderella story like that, sometimes these things happen. That's what we love about the tournament, is shocking results like this. But I would only give Spain a yellow. It's not time to completely pivot yet, but it is a shock for sure. And that brings us then to Cape Verde, the team that was supposed to come in and just enjoy being there. And instead, they put on a defensive masterclass. They actually had a couple of opportunities late in the game to even go and win it. So I don't really know what else you can say for this team. Even with a draw, even with a point, you kind of look at them and you go, okay, can they make it happen again? Question marks there. I'm not really sure it can happen, but they're going to remember this forever. Their fans are going to remember this forever. Anybody who was present in Atlanta, even anybody watching the game, is going to remember this as one of those where were you moments when Cape Verde went in and got a point, stole a point from the Spanish national team. So absolutely all the way, the darkest green light you can possibly give these guys. It was an absolute glorious result for the African nation, making their debut, by the way, in the World Cup. All right, and then now going on to Group K, and spoiler alert, as I'm watching now, Ghana just scored a very late goal. I think it was stoppage time against Panama, so we're not going to have another bonus couple of teams to cover here for this segment, which is okay because we're starting to go longer than I had expected we would. But yeah, moving along then to Group K, we saw this one earlier today. Portugal tying against DR Congo. Now, Portugal is my pick to win the World Cup, my pre-tournament pick to win the World Cup. I love their midfield. I think they have a very strong defensive back line. Their only question mark is what's going on up front with Cristiano Ronaldo. Is he going to help the team, or is he actually going to bring them down a peg because of his legs, because of where he's at age wise versus where the rest of the team, particularly the midfield, which I think is the best in the tournament, is at from a quality perspective. And we may have just gotten our answer in the first match day because Portugal was not strong offensively. I believe through about 85 minutes, they had only gotten 3 shots on target for the entire game. And this is against a team in the Democratic Republic of Congo that had not scored a single point, not scored a single goal in a World Cup match. And they've played a few of them before this one. So it's a concerning result, especially if you're somebody who believed in Portugal. It's a result that I think Roberto Martinez is going to have to think long and hard about in terms of what he does with this lineup moving forward. You could almost argue that the pundits, that the people talking about it on the outside were validated in terms of their thoughts about Ronaldo and what he was going to be capable of doing up front for this team, because it very much seemed like the team was still trying to work through Ronaldo, and he's not in a position at this point in his career to really stretch a defense and to really open up and create opportunities for the rest of this team, which absolutely has the capability of taking advantage of if they're given them. So I looked at some of the performances today from other players on Portugal, Bruno Fernandes, for example, and I thought that there was something left to be desired, but maybe not as much because of what they were doing, but as much because of how they were limited by how the team wanted to play, given what they had up front. So with Portugal, I would give them a red light. One of the few teams in this segment that I give a red light to. And that's because I had such high expectations and they kind of pooped the bed as far as that was concerned. So, Portugal, red light, time to pivot. Let's see what we can do in match days 2 and 3. Democratic Republic of Congo, however, absolute green light, because it was not only an opportunity for them to stay even with the presumed favorite in the group stage, but it was also an opportunity for them to make history for the country. They did that. They did that in excellent fashion. But right at the end of first half stoppage time, Johan Vissa from Brentford headed the ball in. And it's an opportunity, I think, for people now to look at the Congo the way that they probably should have been looking at them, which is that they are a dark horse to get out of the group. This is a good team. They have struggled at times finding the back of the net, but today they had an opportunity and they took it. And they played very good defensively, very well defensively against a team that is very technically skilled in the midfield. So I love what the Congo is able to do today. I think that there's still an opportunity for them to have good results in the rest of group play. Colombia and Uzbekistan being the other two teams in this group. They have yet to play yet. They are the last match day 1 game, and that'll happen later this evening. So we'll see whether or not all 4 teams are tied at 1 point apiece, or if one of those 2 teams in Colombia or Uzbekistan is able to pull ahead. But either way, the Congo has to be happy with what they were able to get against what I believe to be one of the tournament contenders. Absolutely. So hopefully everybody is enjoying the World Cup. That's basically what I have on my mind here over the next 3 weeks. I will be at a World Cup game later on this week, so check out the socials for some updates on that. May even have some fun giveaway related games for you guys on the platform. So again, if you have not done so yet, make sure to follow us and subscribe to us on the socials and on our streaming platforms so that you can keep up to date on what we're doing. As we shift gears here, though, from the World Cup, what's going on now, to what went on, we do have to give a shout out to the New York Knicks, who have won their first NBA title in 53 years, which I think is a great thing for a starving fan base. maybe not everybody's going to agree with that. There were obviously questions that came up about the fan base's level of appropriateness given some things that went on during the final, and those are things that I think you look at as a few bad apples for an otherwise healthy patch, right? And this is a situation where the majority of the fans of the New York Knicks are great fans. They're passionate fans. They're fans who have stuck through thick and thin with this team. And I do think that they deserve to celebrate this victory without too much backlash from other people. But with that being said, it is another team now that has gotten off of their title drought streak. And I think that this is interesting because the Knicks were absolutely on what I would consider to be the top franchises in terms of most starving fan bases. And that's what we're going to do to end this episode is we're going to do a top 10 list of the 10 hungriest slash most starving fan bases in sports. And originally I was keeping this or containing this to American sports, but there is an Easter egg in there of one non-US related fan base that I think is timely given where we're at right now and what's going on. But to kick things off with number 10, I'm going to go with the Portland Trailblazers. And Portland is now the longest NBA title drought for a team that has been in the same city for the entirety of its existence. So that is a situation where a lot of teams have longer droughts in the NBA, but there has also been a lot of relocation in the NBA as well. So Portland has been in Portland. The Trailblazers have been in Portland for the entirety of their current drought, and they're also the only major pro sports team in town. Arguably, you could say the Portland Timbers are there now, and obviously they have a number of other professional sports teams as well. But as far as the Big Four is concerned, Portland is a one-team town, and so a lot of the effort and a lot of the intensity is placed on the Trailblazers as far as a rooting interest is concerned. And so I do think that they are a starving fan base and one that would fit in this top 10 list. Moving on then to number 9, not a Big Four sports league, but if you want to open it up to the Big Five, then we're still on track here. I have the New England Revolution out of the MLS. Now, here's the story on the Revolution. They are one of 3 of the original 10 MLS teams that have never won a title. The other 2 are FC Dallas and, wow, New York Red Bulls. Excuse me there. I'm going to leave that pause in to let you know that I did not have that written down. That was off the dome. FC Dallas and New York Red Bulls are the other 2 that have never won. The difference with the Revs is that they have been to 5 title games and have lost all of them. And the MLS is a league that's only been around for 30 years. So on average, the Revs are getting to a title game once every 6 years, but they have never won a title, an MLS title. And so I put them number 9 on the list here because in the Boston area, they are one of the only teams that does not have consistent championship success. So while maybe a lot of Boston fans are focused on the Big Four sports, they do have a soccer team as well. And that soccer team has been close, but without a cigar so far. Number 8, and I know that this is going to be controversial with a lot of the listeners, especially given that a number of our listeners here to Conversations are fans of teams in the same division as this franchise. But the reason I put them number 8 on the list is because they are one of the gold standards in the NFL. And by gold standard, I mean that they have titles to show for it. They are one of the leading teams in terms of most Super Bowls all time, but it has been a very difficult last 15 or so years for this franchise, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. 6 Super Bowl titles, but toiling in mediocrity over the last decade and a half. And maybe that'll change now with the Mike Tomlin situation now having changed, but it's something that Pittsburgh fans have been asking for, it seems like, for the last 5 or 6 or even maybe longer than that seasons. No playoff wins since 2016 for Pittsburgh. And that is something that, frankly, is unacceptable for a team that is used to winning. So while there has been success of somewhat recent memory for the Steelers, I would still put them as one of the top 10 starving fan bases because they're hungry. They expect wins. And some of the other teams that maybe think that they want to be on this list as well, they don't have that pedigree of winning that I feel like matches what Pittsburgh has. Moving on then to number 7, this is another NFL team. And I really just put this on the list because I'm not really sure, actually, what team this city truly gets behind more than any other. And I'm not sure if there even is one. So I chose the NFL team, given that the NFL is king. But if there are any listeners out there that are fans of this city's teams, let me know if I got this one wrong, because I think you could arguably interchange this with the 3 other teams from the Big Four Sports League that play in this city. But the Minnesota Vikings represent the Minnesota St. Paul area, as well as the Twins, as well as the Timberwolves, as well as the Wild. And Minnesota St. Paul is the city with all 4 major sports represented that has the longest title drought of any city that has the same situation going on, which is all 4 Big Four sports teams. The last time a Minnesota team won a title was in 1991 when the Minnesota Twins did it. So this city in general is starving. It's a great city for sports. Obviously, they have all 4 of the Big Four sports leagues represented, as well as an MLS team. And they are looking anywhere far and wide across that great state for an opportunity to win something. So Minnesota fans, you've got your pick of the litter as far as teams are concerned to root for, but nobody has been able to come through since I was born. So that's why I've got them as number 7. Number 6, I've got the New York Yankees. Now, on one hand, you could probably look at this and say they're similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Recent enough success, but the pedigree for winning is so deeply ingrained into this franchise's history that the fact that it has been 16 years since the Yankees have won makes it feel 3 times longer. In fact, it is now the 3rd longest streak since the Yankees have won a World Series, the longest being 18 years from 1978 to 1996. So the Yankees are coming upon territory that they really don't want to enter, which is a very long streak of not winning a World Series. And the thing that's tough for Yankees fans is that it doesn't look like there's necessarily an end in sight. Yes, there's the opportunity, it feels like every year, for this team to compete. But when you compare the Yankees to the rosters of the Dodgers, to the roster of the Astros, the roster of Toronto, even, you start to wonder whether or not the Yankees really have the opportunity to get back to the World Series and give themselves a chance to break this streak before it becomes the longest streak in the franchise's history. So, given the expectations from the fans and given where they're at with their own current streak, the Yankees are suitably on this list at number 6. Number 5, this is the Easter egg that I referenced earlier. This is not a U.S. team, but it is a team that might be starving as much as any of them. And it is current now because we're in World Cup play, and they actually just played today, and they had a good result. The English national team has a starving fan base. Why? Well, the modern game of soccer was founded in the country, but it has been more than 60 years since England has taken home a major trophy or piece of silverware. 1966 was the last time that they won the World Cup. Now, it's coming home as the natural phrase that the fan base always likes to bring up in both the European Championships as well as the World Cup. But the question is, does this team have the ability to do it? The talent seemingly there in the federation. Thomas Tuchel has decided to put together a team that fits his philosophy, his style of play, rather than maybe taking the best available players in the country. An interesting strategy, given that the previous manager of the team, Garrett Southgate, kind of went a different direction with that. So it was probably time for a change, but the question still looms large over this national team and whether or not they can handle the pressure in the United States during this tournament to get the job done remains to be seen. Last week's episode, or 2 weeks ago's episode, we mentioned and compared the English national team to Notre Dame's fan base. Notre Dame is not on this list, but I think it is an apt comparison, and the English national team is absolutely starving in a similar way. Coming in at number 4, this team replaced the Chicago Cubs with having the longest World Series drought of any team in the league. They are now looking at 78 years and counting since they last won a World Series. That is the Cleveland Guardians. Similar to another franchise that I'll bring up later on in this list, the challenge for the Guardians is that it isn't like they haven't been there. There's actually been 4 opportunities since that last World Series title for the Guardians/Indians to take home that trophy, and they have not been able to do it in any of those 4 opportunities. So the team has been there. The team is a mid-market team. They don't spend a lot of money, so the fan base doesn't always necessarily get behind this team until it's clear that they have a winner. But once they do have a winner, it's a really good fan base, and it's one that absolutely deserves to feel the joy of a World Series once again. Going back to 2016, when the Cubs and the Guardians Indians at that time played each other, it was an opportunity for one of those two to get off of the schneid there. But with the Cubs winning, Cleveland takes over that list. Maybe not as lovable as the Cubs are, but give it another 30 years, hopefully not, if you're a Cleveland fan, and they'll certainly be in that territory that the Cubs had experienced before they finally got it done 10 years ago. Number 3, I have the New York Jets. The Jets are the longest active Super Bowl drought in the NFL. This is counting only teams that have actually won a Super Bowl title before. So the Arizona Cardinals, for example, have never won, but they've also not been in Arizona the whole time. The difference being with the Jets, as opposed to some of the other candidates here, the Jets fan base really cares. They really do care, and they really actually believe that they can win every single year. You look at other teams in the league that maybe are lovable losers. I don't know if anybody's really a lovable loser, but lose more than they win, at least of recent memory. And the Jets fan base truly seems to believe every year that they have an ability to buck the trend, to do something that most experts don't think they're going to do. Rarely have they been able to actually deliver on those hopes and dreams in the recent past, but there is no doubt, similar to Knicks fans, that Jets fans have as much passion as anyone in the sport. And so I do have them high on this list, given where they're at, how much attention they get, and the fact that they do have the longest active streak in the NFL as far as Super Bowl drought is concerned. Number 2, we're going to shift to hockey for the first time. And similar to the English national team, if you are responsible for a game, but it's been a long time since you've won it, that's a hard thing to swallow. And for the Toronto Maple Leafs, that is exactly the situation. As an original 6 team with 13 titles to their name, they currently have the longest drought in the NHL as far as Stanley Cup titles are concerned at 58 years. They've become a meme to some extent as far as NHL circles are concerned. If you're not a Maple Leafs fan, you kind of like watching the Maple Leafs lose. To an extent, you kind of like watching any team from Canada lose. But in the Maple Leafs case, as an original six team, to go that long without a title is really, really tough. And again, similar to the Jets, similar to the English national team, these are fans that really care. When it comes to Toronto sports, nothing is bigger than hockey. Nothing is bigger than Leafs hockey. And it's tough, absolutely, to watch a team like that has gotten pretty close, that has had good teams in the past several years, not be able to get the job done. And then at number one, similar distance wise to Toronto, similar in terms of heartbreak, similar in terms of drought, the Buffalo Bills come in at number one on the list. And what else do you have to say other than wide right times two? And then add 3 other Super Bowl losses to that. The Bills are possibly the most unlucky team in the NFL. 4 straight Super Bowl losses in the 1990s. Wide right times 2, referring to the 2024 playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs that could have sent the Bills back to the Super Bowl, was missed in a similar way to that 1991 wide right kick that ended up being the reason that the Bills lost the Super Bowl that year. It's been a rough road for a franchise, for a fan base that is looking for something to hang their hats on. It's cold up there, but it's not Canada. You're not playing hockey, you're outdoors. It's one of the best fan bases in all of American sports, and yet they have been time and time again hit with some of the most heartbreaking outcomes as far as their team is concerned. And it's not like they haven't gotten to the biggest game. They have been there. They have been there of recent note. They have the best player in the league right now in Josh Allen. And it's anybody's guess as to whether or not they'll actually pull through and end that Super Bowl streak, Super Bowl drought streak, if you will, given that they have Josh Allen. So that's my list. That's also going to be the question that I have for you guys today. Put it in the comments, put it on the socials in the comment section there. Where did I go wrong? Where do you think there should be another team on this top 10 list of most starving, hungriest fan bases? That'll be the interaction for this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you're enjoying the World Cup. Again, that's going to be the focus here for Conversations, also for Around the Corn Sports blog over the next several weeks. I'll be there at a World Cup game later this week, so I'll give you guys a point of view look from the action there, and we'll be back again very shortly with additional content. But until then, enjoy the games and take it easy, Shuckers.